We chose very early in our professional life the collective way, not because we were afraid of working alone, but because we felt it's much more productive. Also, it's more fun to work with others and to confront your own ideas with others. We never had this, I think that's what we share, that we didn't want to have this of ourselves, the idea of the creator as the artist or the filmmaker. Or that's a very outdated concept for me, at least. And I think the discourse and the fighting and the different meanings coming together, and this is really the interesting thing about, like, the research is not you like conceiving a script or a novel or a film at night while you're asleep, but you are collecting. So yeah.
For instance, if we made a research and then we discussed the structure of the film, most of the time we try to lay out the film in cards, saying like, okay, this will be the structure, trying to develop a drama structure. And there's always different cards for sound and image. So already on this level, we try to force ourselves also to think independently about sound and image, because I think they can question each other, and that is very productive. And they can expand each other. But just trying to be one thing never felt right to me, or never felt as productive as trying to think them separately. And
maybe also our background is so research based, so because there is one linear thing which we always come back to, and that is somehow like an origin of our work, and that is the research. So either you can even make a direct political action, or you can do something site specific, or you can do something visual in the visual arts or sound or novel, fiction, documentary, film. It makes no difference, because the core is a research, and then from the research on we decide on which form it will take. And although we might in the recent years have mostly worked in cinema and text, still this is the way we work, so we never know before what form the next film will take. I mean, what I think really appreciate about cinema is a social space, a physical space, where you have the possibility to offer to people a kind of collective thinking, because I think the collectivity of the collective process of social reality somehow gets less and less, and so cinema becomes a more valuable space in a way. And that's what we try to work towards with our films. Yeah, that's maybe why cinema has become more important than when we started.
if you find out something, you have something you want to show in the film, the ideal thing is if you in your research find different ways of approaching that specific image or whatever. So if there is an image or a sound or an incident, an event, a fact, whatever, that you can approach from, let's say, 3 different perspectives, then we would agree in saying that this should be part of our film. And one of those perspectives could be our own finding of that specific thing. So this could include our research and also our mistakes we make and the accidents that happen and all that. But it's not the only one. So it's interesting for us to have something to show different perspectives on something and different approach. I think this would be a limit. If just to show our research is not... Our research also is part of our questioning the whole context. So we are not outside. Our research also makes things happening. I mean, it starts reactions, starts other researches. So we are like, it's not a void space in which we are maneuvering. It's a space where there's a action and response thing going on. So we can't really be sure what impact our research has for other people. So yeah, in this sense, our research is interesting, not to show that we are researching.
And it's not so easy to be open, I find. I mean, that's really something, that's a practice you can learn, and you learn through collective work, and you learn through research to be really, I mean, not open. And yes, of course, I'm very open and I'm tolerant and all this, but no, to really be open, because we are so constructed by all our, educational and cultural and whatever ideas of the world, that it's rather hard to get rid of them. So that's actually what we're working on all the time, I guess.
Yeah, this is part of the research of trying to get into a mood of or status of bizarre openness, of very intense, sucking everything in, and not directly deciding what is important and what is not important. So that this is like a psychological state, a little bit psychotic, you could say, but you have to develop that, I guess. I mean, I think everybody knows that this thing, you start working on something and suddenly you have the feeling it's everywhere. I mean, you read it in the newspaper, you switch on the TV, they're talking about the same thing. So it's like something similar like that you open up your mindset. There's an article which was interesting, which was important for us in our earlier times, by Hakim Bey. He wrote a text called The Temporary Autonomous Zone, which is a very interesting text, a very bizarre text also, but he's talking about this ability of put yourself in a position to see spaces where things are not yet defined. And it's not easy to see them, because there's always somebody telling you, this is the world, this is the status quo. But so you have to put yourself in a position to be able to see things or moments in history that are not yet defined.
I think that, for example, the temporary autonomous zone, that text by Hakim Bey, it was exactly constructing the arc between the local and the global, and that was a pre-globalization text. But I had the feeling when I read that it's really important, if things become more global, that we, on a very local basis, try to understand and to construct networks to understand this becoming more global kind of world. So I think we're still on that quest, that we try to understand where we are in that moment, and of course we put ourselves into certain situations and spaces in the course of the research, and while trying to understand what we as physical persons have to do with this situation. Of course, there's a more global context in which you then can. But first of all, it's about why am I here, and what am I seeing, and who's with me in that space, and who's watching me, and who am I watching, listening. Yeah, so it's a more than 180 degrees horizon which you try to open up, which is very difficult, because you might think that we can't watch further, but I think we have to. That's something I would really like to learn. Yeah.
Also, we want to be specific. I mean, we want to really, and being specific is much easier if you take something small and start with that and really look at it. So what we are not interested in is finding proofs for theories. I mean, I don't know. I don't care about that. So it's more interesting to take something, then look at it, and maybe at the end you develop a theory out of it or whatever, or you see, oh, it's connected with other theories. But first of all, you have to take that particular thing very seriously. And you have to see where do you find it? How does it look like? It's more like a detective's work, more like investigation, like Arthur Conan Doyle, like Sherlock Holmes kind of thing. What can I actually see if you are entering in the room and you have wet shoes and your one leg is like that? Then I can say you're coming from that, blah blah blah. It's all this deductive method which are going on and on and on. But I think this is a method of working. To start here and then going like that and like that and like that, and in the end you see, oh my God, it's all linked to that. So it's a journey more, like a discovery.
But I think the difference is that we are not trying, and that's really what I, as a writer of suspense literature, as a form of political realism, I would always say we are not here to investigate with the aim to reconstruct the wholeness of a world which has existed before it was taken apart by whatever violence or so. What we are not trying to reconstruct, we are trying to deconstruct by investigating. So that's really a difference to the Sherlock Holmes thing, or maybe Sherlock Holmes was the only investigator who suddenly became aware that he will never be able to reconstruct. But that's really
it's true.
And I think structural violence on a global level you can only understand if you go very close, and if you go very narrow, and if you go very serious in a certain space, in a certain situation, and then you might be able to understand it a bit more. We don't work thematically. I mean, we don't look for a theme. We look for a kind of moment in which, for example, the whole Havari project started not because we wanted to do something on refugees, but it's like we wanted to look, we physically were at the Mediterranean and we wanted to understand what is going on there right now. And by now I think it's also getting more and more that we don't even look for moments anymore, but that we try to be aware when moments happen to us. So actually we are not, right now we are working with the same people on the same issues all over and over again, like revision, undergaze, and so there are linear structures which seem to be reason enough to start a project. No, you can't consume the film because the film won't work without you. That's the thing. It's a kind of offer. You offer a space, you offer a certain material, but it's not working without you as a person, and it works also different for everybody, I guess.
It's also an invitation. I mean, it's an invitation to the audience to follow up the same or similar, or to have similar experiences like us making the film. So I don't see the big difference between us as the directors or realisateur or whatever, then like compared to the audience. Actually, the problems the audience has to watch a certain image is more or less the same problem we have. So, and we are trying to transfer that, our problems or our difficulties, or our exploration, our desire, whatever, into the cinema hall. So it's more or less sitting. We are also seeing us sitting in the audience, trying to question what do we actually see. So it's a common question. It's not a strategy of like saying we know something you don't know and you should sit there and suffer and find out. No, it's like really a common question, and I think that's very productive. I mean, of course, not everybody likes that, but you don't have to. I mean, that's the great thing of cinema. I mean, you can walk out like all these people did now, but that's okay. I mean, the beauty of cinema is that you have this strange kind of bureaucratic contract that you pay entrance fee and you're gonna sit there and you're okay with following the vision of somebody else for around 90 minutes, and if it's getting too much on your nerves you can walk out, but many times you don't. So you just follow that and you have that space where do you have that space? I mean, in cinema you have it. So the people are more aware of, they have more experience with making images. So they react in a different way to your approach of making an image of them. So they are much more at various points we experienced a certain kind of knowledge, or let's say a certain kind of self-representation of, like, I know how I want to be portrayed. It's like this positioning and all that. This has changed a lot, I think, and this can create very interesting, like negotiations, because you say, like, no, but I don't want you to sit like that because I think this is like a stereotype, and the other person saying, no, but hello, or in the end, like in the way how we worked with Colorado Velcro, and it really leads to a common practice where we say, okay, we're going to make a film together. Why? Because making images for him, not in a cinematic context, but in general, is something he's used to. I mean, they are portraying their life, they are playing with the camera, they're playing, so they have a relation to it. And I guess that's only possible because these image creating devices are everywhere and are so part of our lives now. So that is really has changed a lot, and that gives space to all kind of interesting side effects, I would say.
I would not call it crime, I would call it violence, but it's very present in all the reality. It's just that you look at it or you rather not look at it. It's not crime as in, okay, there's a heile Welt, there is something complete, and then there is a crime which disturbs this world, and then you can reinstall this world. It's just that the violence is there structurally in the system in which we live, in the capitalist system, in the political systems, even in the cultural systems, there's violence, and you just decide to look at it and to name it.
I would also say power. Power is a very, and to question power, and to this is something that is very, goes through all our films. It could, if it's power that is, let's say, the structural violence of the state, or the power structures of the state, but also the power structures that are inherited and are an integral part of making film. So we are trying to, when we make a film that is questioning power structures, is also trying to question our own means of production that are part of that, and that how do they relate to all these questions of power and resistance and being visible, non-visible. So this is an integral part of filmmaking, I would say. And so we are trying to be very aware of our own and see it as not as a limitation, but see it as a possibility to really also articulate ourselves, or to find means of aesthetic, to make aesthetic decisions, to help ourselves to make aesthetic decisions, to say, okay, where is now, what happens if I film a person like that, or if I film a person like that? Do I follow, is that way following a certain known power structure, or is that way creating a different or surprising image that could question the power structure? Then definitely we would go for the second one. We have a very, very old school way of editing, in a sense preparing the edit, that we are trying to develop a system of, as I said, cards. So we do a protocol of everything that we have. Each sound, each text, each interview is protocoled. So we have all that, and then we're trying to put small labels on small cards. And then we have a whole wall, and we are constructing our film so that we have a drama structure. So actually, we already have the final image, in theory. So we have a whole, if everything works out, we have a whole journey throughout that is there. The film is there on the wall, and we just now start editing. But of course, saying that, we all know that this never works like entirely, and then you realize it doesn't work, here is a problem, there's a problem.
Yeah.
The film takes it another direction, but still we have a very clear drama structure.
And also a very structured way of working. I mean, we give ourselves the biggest space in the research, and then even before the shooting, we are scripting a lot. We are scripting in the way of how we develop a drama structure, by images, by writing. And then we go shooting, and we don't shoot for half a year, and we don't edit for half a year. It's not necessarily that it all is like, okay, like we have tons of material, and then we, like the idea of the essay filmmaker who's like drowning in material, and it's not that.
No, we have different forms of material. Let's say for revision, we had like the whole protocols of the trial. I mean, this was like huge, of course, a huge amount of material which we were going through during the research, trying to find like anchor points where we said like, okay, this could be interesting, that could be interesting, this we should involve in our film. But all these decisions are actually done before filming, actually, most of the time. And then there's a second process after filming, like trying to watch the material we have, and then to take a step back and really be honest with what the material shows. Normally, if you edit with other people, that's sometimes more easier, because the other person is really a neutral person looking at the material, was not there when you filmed, could say like, hey, that's all nice anecdotes you're talking about, but I don't see that. We have to construct this kind of little bit of that distance. We have to construct for ourselves as we are editing our own film, and then I'm editing the film. And then I also have to follow a little bit the material. I have to find the inherent structures that are there that were maybe not planned, but that suddenly appear, and you have to think, okay, now it leads to that direction. And most of the time, it's not very productive to edit against a certain inherent structure. It can be necessary, but it's very often much more productive to find that structure. You always hear background noises of cars and whatever, because it's nearly impossible to make a landscape shot in Germany without having a car in the background. So it's really it's not a pure landscape in which the human is invading or whatever. It's really the landscape shows how we all deal with it, or how we all. It's part of our own surrounding.
What you do is you compose the soundscape of the film. I mean, he really does very consciously a kind of, it's not even just an editing, but it's more composing of different soundscapes and sounds.
And there's always like a very precise sound concept in the beginning. We are all not interested in pure sound. We are very much interested in all the disturbance and all the small artifacts that show your own presence in the sound. That was important by Day of the Sparrow, that we hear the person who's watching. So because that we really hear the crackling of the foot and all that, so that we don't hear the bird we are seeing, because that bird is far away, and only through the binoculars of the bird watcher you can get him close. But what you hear is the presence of the person watching. So stuff like that is like very much conceptual, and is and we are really following that while we are filming. And if it comes to Havari, it's interesting that here the image was very important. I mean, that all the sounds derive from film scenes that have been filmed with a camera. And this creates a certain kind of way how the people speak, because they speak in a totally different way as if we would now make an interview. I mean, these are scenes. I mean, they're watching out of the window, they're walking in, they're doing coffee in the kitchen, they're moving from one space to another. This was all filmed with a quite big camera, and there was a sound guy, and it was like a very set kind of shooting, so everybody knew, okay, now I have to do that. It creates a certain tension, a certain focus. And later when we edited, we were trying to keep that in a sense that we were not editing, even as we were only editing the sound, we were not editing as if we would edit sound, but as if we would edit the image. Let's say, example, person standing in the kitchen, moving to the living room. In sound, this is just like, okay, she's there in the living room. You understand that immediately. If you would now edit as a film editor with an image of a person in the kitchen, you would wait till the person is like going out of the frame and then cut, entering the frame in the living room. It's a totally different way of timing. And we were trying to keep that timing, even though we don't see the image. So if you listen carefully, you see that these transitions are very long and that it's actually, so that's the difference. It's not a radio play. It's really a film without images or with a different image. So, and this creates a certain, it's very subtle, but it creates a certain ambience of listening and triggering images that you have to create your own. So this is an example for how we, sound is incredibly important, and I'm working with the sound people for the concept, and I'm doing a rough sound edit while I'm editing the film. Then somebody's doing the sound editing really in cooperation with me, and then the mixing is done by somebody else, but we are like part of it.
Je suis sur la fenêtre et je regarde mon père. Il est avec des gens. C'est des terroristes.